So, yeah, today is Easter, so it means we need to speak about Jesus. I think we owe it to him. At least the 2 days a year where we actually talk about Jesus at service is Easter and Christmas service. And maybe he's mentioned one or two other times throughout the year, but I think it's very fair to say, if we're being very honest about our faith and our tradition, that we're not a Jesus church, right? It's I think if we're honest, we kind of have to admit that, right? We're not talking about Jesus every Sunday, and actually we're not mentioning Jesus that much, right? So again, I think on Easter we should definitely talk about Jesus, right? But I think the reality is, and this is what I want to touch upon today, is we're very heretical in our beliefs about Jesus, right? I think it's fair.
Controversial.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we're a heretical Christian church if we call ourselves Christian, right? It's a question I've gotten many times, like, oh, you're in a different religion, is it Christian, right? And I always feel very conflicted answering that question because, we do believe in Jesus. We do believe Jesus is the Messiah, but I feel like it's dishonest to say I'm Christian, right? Because obviously when you say you're Christian, there's a certain expectation, a certain kind of thinking about what that means, right? But I think the truth is, we're not Christian, right? We're heretics. We're Christian heretics, right? And I'm saying that because there's basically three things that we believe that makes us very hard for Christians to accept, right? And it's very difficult for Christians to feel good about what we believe, right? In fact, it actually makes them quite upset. It's actually contradictory, controversial to what they believe, right? And the first one is this idea around Jesus's divinity, right? And the idea that Jesus didn't exist before he was born. He's not a kind of divine God being, but that he is a person, that he was born when he was born. And one of the key elements of that is the fact that Jesus had a physical father, right? Very heretical, right, belief. But what's very powerful, I find, because it's very hard to witness to Christians because of this. And the reason I'm mentioning this today is because Christianity is the fruit of Jesus' life and his work, right? And Easter is really one of the main Christian holidays because it is the crucifixion, right? It is the moment of the forgiveness and the resurrection, the forgiveness of all sin, right? So to tell Christians that Jesus had a physical father is very challenging, right? So I never tell them who it is, right? I always tell them it's in the Bible, read the Bible. In fact, everyone, if you haven't read the Bible, I would really recommend today, because it's Easter, it's only a small section of the Bible to really be able to find out who Jesus's father is, right? And this is kind of my approach now when I try to witness to Christians. I say, Jesus had a physical father. And they're like, what? You mean God? No. Joseph? No. I'm like, well, who? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. It's in the Bible and it's very clear. Once you know Jesus had a physical father, there's only one person it could be. There's only 4 gospels and 2 of them start after Jesus's birth. So there's only 2 gospels that even talk about Jesus's birth. And you just have to read them till the point Jesus is born, right? Or actually, you only have to read them till the point Mary's pregnant, right? And then you know. No, actually, you have to read them until Jesus is born because one of them's a little tricky in the timelines there for Mary's pregnancy. Anyway, that's the first kind of, heretical point, right? And that comes very closely to lineage. And another point that's very powerful in the principal understanding of lineage is it really explains Jesus's lineage written in the Bible, right? Because there's 2 lineages written in the Bible, and they're very separate, right? And one of them is obviously Mary's lineage, right? So again, that's very difficult for Christians to accept, even though it's kind of clearly written in the Bible, even though it's very clear, this kind of logical explanation, it's completely contradictory, completely heretical to everything Christianity stands for, everything Christianity believes, right? And that brings us to today. The other very heretical thing is our belief in the resurrection, right? Christians believe Jesus' physical body came back to life, and his physical body walked around with the disciples and disappeared and came into existence, vanished in thin air. But it's very clear that our belief through the principle about the resurrection is very different. We obviously believe Jesus' resurrection was a spirit body manifesting through people's spiritual senses in a very real and physical way, right? His disciples didn't recognize him. And then when they did recognize him, he vanished, right? He came into a completely closed, locked room, right? And then there's the question of doubting Thomas, right? Well, show me the nails in your hand. But that's something that we know a spirit can do. A spirit can feel physical and feel the same as a physical body, right? Because when we talk about the fall, we kind of describe how spiritual senses work and how real something can feel, even with the spirit body. But Jesus couldn't explain to them that he was a spirit, because when he popped up in the room, the actual Bible says they were afraid that he was a spirit. So he couldn't just say, I'm a spirit, then they'd like freak out. So he had to say, no, it's me. It's really me. But it was obviously his spirit body, and their spirit senses were opened for those 40 days. So that's very heretical, right? And again, that makes it very difficult for Christians to feel that we're Christian, or that we're good, right? In a way, we're almost evil because we're going against Christ, right? That's how Christians feel about us, right? And I can kind of understand, I'm very sympathetic, because it kind of reminds me when I speak sometimes to very, very negative ex-members, right? And they're very negative about everything. They accuse Father of things. They say the church is corrupt, everything is abuse, it's just for money, right? And I get it's like a personal attack, right? It's like, you're not just attacking Father or true family or the church, but you're attacking me. You're attacking what I believe. And I really feel like our faith, what we teach, that's how Christians can feel very easily, right? That you're not just attacking my faith, or you're not just challenging what I believe, but you're attacking me personally, right? And I'm mentioning this because I think it's very important that we understand our relationship with Christianity and our relationship with Christians, especially if we want to witness to them, especially if we want to build relationships, especially if we want to help them understand God's will. We don't want to personally offend them, right? That's not the way to start a relationship. So we need to kind of understand this dynamic, right? And then I think one of the hardest things to accept is that Jesus was 50% the Messiah, right? That there had to be two Messiahs, that Jesus should have gotten married, and that there should have been a female Messiah, right? Because, in the principle, that's very obvious, right? That God is male and female. And so there needs to be a male and female Messiah. And it's very, very obvious looking at Christian history that without the female Messiah, Christianity has struggled to bring that kind of balance to society. It's the strongest, maybe one of the biggest problems in Christian culture and Christian faith is that they still haven't really understood this man-woman dynamic, right? I follow a few Christian influencers on social media, not a lot, but just kind of peripherally, right? And sometimes they say awful things, right? Like they justify really incredibly misogynistic, really sexist kind of views that they justify with the Bible. And actually, it is in a way part of the Christian culture and the Christian belief system, these kind of actually very bad relationship advice around men-woman relationship. So it is very much like, for me, for my faith, one of the things that I feel is so important is the idea that there always had to have been two messiahs, right? That this is what it means, the idea of true parents, right? That God is a parent, so the Messiah is actually a parent, right? There has to be that balance, right? I almost believe that you need 100% equality, right? Between men and women. If there's going to be a male Messiah, there has to be a female Messiah, right? It doesn't mean they do things the same way, but it means that they're they both have like their own responsibility, their own way of doing things. And so it's not just Christians, I think, that struggle with this point. I think this is something we've seen even in our own church, right? And so, yes, it's a Jesus service, but I'm actually bringing it back to true parents, right? It's actually going to be a service about mother, because I'm sure Jesus is with Father and Spirit world working together. They've always worked together. I'm sure they're happy hanging out together. But I'm sure that in this time of the providence, what they also care about is it's mother's time of the providence. And are we kind of uniting with mother? And so it's, you can see that Father, why it's hard for our members, because Father was such a dynamic, extroverted, speaking personality, right? He was always visible. He was always in front. He was always telling people what to do. He was always giving most of the public speeches. He was talking for hours on end, right? He was scolding the leaders. He was scolding the members, right? He was starting businesses. He was meeting with leaders. And Mother was always, in the background, more quiet, but, raising a family, taking care of things, right? But always there and always supporting Father. And so you can kind of understand why people focused on Father, right? Again, I can understand why members might struggle with that, right? In the same way that Christians might struggle with that. But Mother is also the Messiah, right? And it's different. It's a motherly Messiah versus a fatherly Messiah. She doesn't like to talk as long, right? She keeps things much more simple. She tries to, she sings much more often. Father liked to sing, but Mother sings almost any time she's in like a public room with members, right? So it's just a very different style, which is what you'd expect. You don't want, when I say there has to be two Messiah, that doesn't mean they're two Messiahs that do exactly the same thing. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. There needs to be a male Messiah who does male things and a female Messiah that does female things. And they're both equally a reflection of God. And, just for me personally, one example that always sticks with me is when I'm trying to listen to Father in Korean, it's really hard, right? He's got a real strong accent. He uses a lot of old terminology. He uses these really abstract analogies. When Mother speaks Korean, it is like so simple. It's so clear. She uses short sentences, clear points, easy words, right? It's almost, if I can use the word, it's cleaner, right? It's just, it's smooth, grammatically correct Korean, right? And just like easy for a foreigner who like learned the grammar in the book to understand, right? But also, it's just very heartfelt, very simple, very clear, and that's how she likes to speak, right? And so yeah, because of this prayer condition that we've been doing, and the first point is praying for true family. I've been praying a lot about Hyunjinim and Hyungjin, H1 and H2, right? And I've given a service about this before, like how I can kind of understand why they've, kind of understood their father, but not their mother kind of dynamic. But it's something that it still really bothers me. Like I still worry about. Like when I look at the providence, to me, like one of the most important things is Hyunjinim and Hyungjinim somehow being able to come back and unite with Mother. It's on a list of impossible things we pray about, like North-South Korea unification and, Israel, Palestine unification, right? Like they just feel like impossible problems, but I still genuinely am praying for them because I think it's the core of the providence, this complete balance between men and women, right? Father once explained the two biggest problems in the world are our own mind and body, right? That's the first struggle. And the second struggle is between men and women, right? The relationship problem. And so, it's like I understand, right? I understand, and I have close friends, who I grew up with, who I was very close with. that now work with Hyunjinim and or work with Hyunjinim, right? People I respect that I really do genuinely love and miss, and I'm kind of sad or heartbroken that they kind of are following Hyunjinim or Hyunjinim, but also that Hyunjinim and Hyunjinim are not with Mother, that they're kind of doing their own thing, right? So so now they're the heretics, right? We're the heretics to the Christians, and then now we have our own heretics, right? And so, but at the end of the day, like, the word doesn't mean anything, right? Because heretic in one way means people that don't believe what I believe, right? Or people who threaten my belief, right? And a lot of people, when they're thinking about religious faith, they're like, well, yeah, you believe that, but everyone believes that they're right. Like, if you're Muslim, you believe that that's the truth. And if you're Christian, you believe that's the truth. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Why would you believe anything if you didn't believe it was the truth, right? And if you don't believe anything, then you end up with another set of beliefs that you believe is the truth, right? But whatever you believe is the truth. It's kind of like the definition of your own belief is what you think is true. So yeah, I believe that I'm right and everyone else is wrong, right? It's just, and so I've always taken this approach about our faith that, yeah, okay, I'm in a cult. What's that mean? It just means I'm in something that other people think is weird, right? And I understand that. I understand that other people think we're a cult, right? I still believe it, but I don't mind calling it a cult because that doesn't change what I believe, right? Yes, I understand that we're heretics if you're Christian, right? And I understand why, right? It's what we believe is almost offensive to what you've been taught and to what you believe, right? But at the end of the day, it's, I think truth is something, faith is something, even though it's very personal, I do think that what is objectively true ends up succeeding, right? And this is how God's providence has gone forward, right? People always believe many different things. They always try many different things. But society comes back to the things that are closest to the truth, closest to God's will, right? And so I really do believe that this kind of absolute equality between men and women is why, our faith is going to surpass Christianity, surpass Islam, right? Surpass all the other faiths, because that is objectively more true. And it's also why I think secularism has surpassed a lot of the religious faiths, because secularism focused on human rights, on equality, which compared to kind of existing Christianity, existing Islam, is more true because it's more on this point of equality between men and women. But you can see how quickly that veers off into other directions without like a foundation of faith, without a moral principle that guides it. So, it's whenever we talk about Easter, our view of Easter is always that it's a sad event because Jesus died without getting married, that it was unbalanced, and that history has remained unbalanced until true parents could come on the earth, right? And then the whole point of true parents is that balance of God's characteristics, right? The balance of men and women, the balance of yin and yang. And that's something I really, really believe in, right? And since Brendan mentioned he heard my testimony yesterday, I said in that testimony, one of my favorite words is balance, right? It's because to me, it's like the simplest word to encapsulate the whole principle, right? Everything's out of balance and God's trying to bring everything back into balance, right? And that includes our mind and body, our internal desires, and it includes the relationships that we have with other people. So in conclusion, I really, I know that faith is personal, right? Each person's faith is slightly different. Everyone, even though we all come here and we come to church, we have slightly different views on how we should practice our faith, how we should live our faith. And that's natural, right? Because we're all individuals, we're all individual embodiments of truth. But we do have some kind of shared faith, right? And we're trying to share that with people because we believe it will help them, right? I think Christians will benefit from understanding that the Messiah should have been a man and a woman. I think that will make them happier, right? It'll make their relationships better, right? Um, but I think it is important that we're very humble, right, about our faith, because when we look at history, we see that when Jesus came, people were so confident in their faith that they couldn't open their mind to his message, right? And same when Father came, Christians were so confident in their faith, right? That they couldn't see what Father was trying to teach, right? So I think even in our own faith, even though I said, I believe I'm right and everyone else is wrong, right? I tried to be humble about that, if that makes sense, right? It's like I could be wrong, and I have to, if I want other people to listen to me, I have to be able to keep that door open, right? And so something Father said that, I always keep in my mind is, he said, if anyone out there could find a better path than this, please tell me. Like I've really tried to find an easier way to do God's will and, solve the problems of the world. Like I'm open to other things, but this is the best I've found, right? This is this is the way I found. This is God's will. If you got a better one, please let me know, right? Because this is really tough sometimes, right? I'm paraphrasing, but so like I think about that, and I really try to have that heart, especially when I'm trying to witness to other people. It has to be give and take. It can't be like I'm right, you're wrong, so I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. It's I think I'm right, and this is why I think I'm right. And why do you think you're right? Right. And I'm willing to change my mind if you can convince me, right? If you can convince me that actually the balance of men and women means that there should only be a male Messiah, but that allows for balance, you could change my mind. I'll be a born again Christian tomorrow, right? But right now, I can't see how that's possible. I can't see how an only male Messiah brings unity between men and women, right? It seems very unfair, right? It seems very unbalanced. So I think the other part of that is then understanding other people's faith, not from an intellectual point of view, because it's very easy to explain why you believe something. You can always put logical points together, right? I don't know if any of you have read C.S. Lewis, but he's very good at kind of explaining why the fall could not have been a sexual sin. He addresses that directly. This is a Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Narnia author, very strong Christian. And one of his books, he writes an essay about why the fall of man was not a sexual sin, right? He's a very logical person. He explains it out. He was wrong, but he had a logical reason, right? And so that's my point. It's the understanding has to be understanding of people's emotional situation, right? Because people believe what they believe with some logical explanation, but really it's their personal experience. It's the things that they felt in their life, right? People have felt the Holy Spirit when they converted to Christianity, and it's changed their lives. They were inspired. They felt God's heart. And so you could never tell them that that's not true or that's not right, right? And it's important that when we talk to people, that we understand that we're empathetic, right? And I hate using the word empathetic because it gets hijacked and abused, but in a way, it just means that you understand what another person might be feeling, right? And then I think we have to also be forgiving when we're talking to people about faith, because their beliefs might offend us, right? It might insult us, right? And it's very important, I think, that we don't get offended about our beliefs. Or if we are offended, we at least forgive people for offending us, right? Because I think when you believe something and it's so emotionally connected to you, if you talk about it, you're going to be offended. Even if you don't want to be offended, you're going to be offended if people say something like, Father just does it for the money. That's offensive. I find that offensive, right? I don't believe it. I've never seen any evidence of it. Like it really bothers me, but people are going to say that, and I need to forgive them for it in order to be able to like talk to them about it and get them past that, right? So, and I think the last thing, as in everything in life, we have to be very kind of sincere and honest about what we believe. And when we're talking to people, if we're not sincere, if we don't really believe something, then we can say whatever we want, right? We can give the lecture, we can say Father's the Messiah, Mother's the Messiah, but if our heart doesn't actually believe it, people can tell, right? It comes off very well. I feel like when I see people who witness really, really well, I always feel it's the ones who are the most sincere about their faith, and they just want to share it with people. And sometimes they bulldoze over, any objections, and like, no, no, this is true. Like, I know it's true, right? And that conviction is really, it really moves people, and it kind of stops them, and they can tell that this person is sincere, which kind of contradicts my first 2 points about being humble, that you could be wrong, and understanding them, right? Because I haven't been a good witnesser, right? I haven't succeeded in converting someone to the church, right? So maybe my humility and my understanding slows me down. It should just be conviction, right? But at least you need the conviction. And yeah, because people can feel that. Like, we are emotional beings. You can't lie to people if you don't, even if you're lying to yourself, right? People can feel when you don't mean to. And I said something similar actually yesterday, like about going to the blessing. Like, people need to really believe that they want to go to the blessing for themselves, right? They need to believe why they're going. If it's pressure, if their parents are pushing them to do it, if someone else is pushing them to do it, if they feel guilty because, they're a second gen and it's what they're supposed to do, then it doesn't work, right? It just doesn't work out. So yeah, so on this Easter, I really wanted to talk about, Jesus being the Messiah, and our kind of relationship with Christians, but also how that really connects with our kind of heretical view of Christianity, because Easter really brings that out. I always feel every Easter, I'm like, the Christians are so happy and we're kind of so sad. It's like a direct opposite. But also then it really reminds me of, Hyunjinim and Hyungjinim and Mother. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels there, right? In terms of our relationship with Christianity and then our relationship with our own heretics, right? It's really comes down to this point around, Mother's role, Mother's position, right? What that means in the context of the principle, and what we believe about true parents as true parents, right? And so you might have seen, I wrote it in my email, there's new content that Mother is bringing out to try to help people understand her role, her position. And so I really encourage people to read it, to study it, to pray about it, to understand it, right? Because I felt it's very good. And I'm conscious of this ceremony, but I have time. Actually, there was one other thing I forgot to mention earlier. But I want to share this experience because it really helped me to, let's say, understand this balance between mother and father, right? When I was on STF, there was a sister, and she was a very skeptical sister, right? Like she was very critical of the church, even on STF. She was very skeptical of true parents and our beliefs. I don't think she's a member anymore. But one time, she was asked to give like a representative prayer, and she started the prayer. This is 2004, by the way. So I think that UPF hadn't been founded yet. Father was still alive. So this was 20 years ago. And she started her prayer, beloved, dear heavenly parent. And when I heard it, I was like, that's so beautiful, right? And I was like, that is the most principled thing I've heard, right? That was my reaction when she said it. I'm like, yeah, of course. Why do we say father? That's almost sexist, right? Because she was a real strong feminist. So you could see where like she was coming from. But I was like, that's amazing. And I didn't really have like the conviction to pray that way after she did. Like, I guess it was just peer pressure. It was just weird. But it was like, I never forgot it. It really moved me. And so when Mother came out and was like, yeah, we have to pray, dear heavenly parents, I was like, oh, great. Like, I was kind of wanting to do that anyway. Like, I had already heard that, right? It wasn't even a surprise. But going back to the point about Hyungjinim, H2, that was one of the things that started his kind of journey away from Mother. He couldn't accept that. And Mother asked him to give like a public prayer. I think it was even the Chanilguk Declaration event. where he's prayed in front of all the members, "Dear Heavenly Father," right? After Mother had asked everyone to pray, "Dear Heavenly Parent," right? He couldn't accept that, even that small kind of encompassing of, Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother, right? So you can see why it's such a crucial, like, historical challenge, why it's such like a pivotal point around what it means, what the position and role of the Messiah means, right? Um, and so I just thought that was like, it was always very fascinating to me how difficult that can be for people to accept, right? And just remembering that sister like 20 years ago, it was like 8 years before Mother declared it, already kind of just from her like strong desire for equality, already kind of seeing that that's the way it should be, right? So, um, so yeah, so I wanted to share that as well because I thought it was for me, it was a very kind of revelatory event, right? Like I really understood something deeper about God from this sister praying this way. And it really like stayed with me. And it actually really helped me when Father passed and Mother took over. I was actually skeptical. I was kind of wondering what Mother would do, right? Little judgmental. And I knew that. And I was like, let's see what Mother does. And then because one of the first things she did was like, let's pray in Heavenly Parent's name, it really it started to win me over very, very quickly. Right. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I think when we talk about Jesus, we're talking about a lot of things, right? And I think the reason we don't focus on Jesus is because it's true mother's error, it's true parents' error. But that's on the foundation of Jesus, on the foundation of the families, Abraham, Moses, right? Just like Christians don't focus on Moses or Abraham because it's kind of all encapsulated. So that was my Easter service. I can tell my kind of low voice is putting Jisung to sleep. So I'm going to close with a prayer. Heidi's desperately massaging his hand to keep him alive. But I understand because we lost an hour of sleep. So people are going to be a little more tired today. So I'll close with a prayer and then we'll kind of take a short break and we'll go up to the Chuncheon. It'd be nice if everyone could come actually, because you get to take some of the holy wine with you. Sorry, holy salt. And we'll kind of close with the ceremony. So everyone can join me in prayer. Sarang Manashin Hanal Bumunim. Today is Easter Sunday, and according to the record in the Bible, it was the day that your only begotten Son, Jesus, was resurrected and started a 40-day period to actually start Christian history. And just a few days before, Jesus had been crucified, a day that was a real tragedy in your hearts. The Bible kind of hints at how angry you were. The sky went dark and the curtain in the temple was torn and there was an earthquake. But in many ways, Jesus' last word asks you to forgive the people of the time. Maybe that saved their lives from your wrath. But we know that it was a tragedy and it was a really terrible moment in history, a heartbreaking moment in history for you as a parent. To not just lose your son, but to lose the hopes and dreams that you had of Jesus to really build a family in a world and to bring your lost children back to you. So we know through the principle, the course of history, to come back, to again be able to bring second coming, to bring Father, and then also then to finally bring true Mother, so that we could have a position of parents. Actually, in the month of April, we'll be celebrating the 64th anniversary of the Holy Wedding, the marriage supper of the Lamb, the start of the blessing, because after that, the parents were finally able to give the blessing to other people. And so all of us here has really benefited from that blessing, whether we were blessed ourselves or our parents were blessed. It really changed the course of our lives and is really a defining moment for us. So I pray as we go about today, we can really reflect deeply on our relationship with you, with history. We can reflect on our relationship with our own parents, with our brothers and sisters, with true parents, and with you. We pray always when we have these opportunities to really celebrate a historical event, we can put it in the context of how we can grow, how we can become deeper and more spiritual and more loving. So we thank you for this time together. Pray your presence can be with us today and every day, that we can make the conditions to become true sons and daughters of our heavenly parent. And we're grateful for our lives and the blessings we have, and report this in our names. Name of Young Il Lo, a blessed central family, Aju. Okay, thank you. I'll welcome Brendan back up. Thanks, officers.